The air in Friedberg, Germany, was crisp, carrying the scent of pine, and something distinctly foreign, like damp earth, mixed with a faint aroma of brewing coffee. For Elvis Presley, Private E2, U.S. Army. It was a world away from Memphis, Tennessee. He'd been drafted just like any other young man, and despite his fame, the Army treated him no different. Pulled on his fatigues, the rough fabric. A stark contrast to the custom-made suits he was used to. "Rise and shine, Presley," a voice boomed from across the barracks. It was Sergeant Henderson, a stocky man with a no-nonsense attitude and a surprisingly kind glint in his eyes sometimes. Elvis swung his long legs out of his bunk, his perfectly coiffed hair a bit mussed from sleep. He ran a hand through it, a habit he couldn't break. Being a soldier meant early mornings, grueling drills, and a complete lack of privacy. But it also meant something else, a chance to be just Elvis, not Elvis the King. Here he was one of the guys. The barracks were a long, narrow room, filled with rows of metal bunks, footlockers, and the constant smell of sweat, shoe polish, and institutional soap. 40 men lived here, each with his own story, his own dreams, and his own fears. Elvis had quickly learned to adapt, polished his boots until they shined like mirrors, made his bed with hospital corners that would make his mama proud, and kept his locker organized like a military manual. He grabbed his toothbrush and headed for the communal washroom, passing several half-awake soldiers grumbling as they stumbled towards the same destination. Some nodded to him, some offered a mumbled greeting. He always responded with a warm smile, even before he'd had his coffee. He knew some guys were curious, maybe even a little resentful, that a celebrity was among them. But he tried his best to show them he was just another guy trying to do his duty. After a quick cold water splash to the face that shocked him awake, Elvis joined the line for breakfast. The mess hall was loud, a clatter of trays and spoons, the rumble of voices, and the ever-present aroma of powdered eggs and lukewarm coffee. He sat down at a long table with a few of his bunkmates. Tony, a wisecracking kid from Brooklyn. Mike, a quiet farmer from Iowa. And Billy, a lean, dark-haired fellow from rural Alabama. Billy was usually quiet. He ate his meal slowly, his eyes often scanning the room, but rarely meeting anyone's gaze. He kept to himself more than most. While others joked and traded stories about their girlfriends back home or their wild nights on leave, Billy mostly just listened, sometimes offering a small, polite nod. Tony asked, digging into his eggs like he hadn't eaten in a week. "Another 5-mile run, probably," Mike grumbled, taking a sip of coffee. "My feet are still sore from yesterday," Elvis chuckled. Build's character, Mike. Billy took a small bite of toast, his eyes distant. He seemed to be somewhere else, entirely far from the noisy mess hall and the drab army life. Elvis had noticed it before, a faraway look in his eyes, a slight slump to his shoulders, even when standing at attention. He knew that look. It was the look of someone missing home. He remembered his first few weeks, how he'd called his parents every chance he got just to hear their voices, how he'd stared at the photos of Graceland and his family tucked into his wallet. But Elvis had always had a strong support system. People who wrote him letters every day, sending care packages filled with his favorite treats. He wondered about Billy. Did he have a close family? After breakfast, the platoon marched to the training grounds. The morning fog was lifting, revealing the sprawling base. They spent hours drilling, marching, and practicing marksmanship. Elvis, despite his fame and soft hands, was surprisingly good at soldiering. He paid attention, followed orders, and pushed himself, not wanting to let anyone down. He found a certain peace in the discipline, a new kind of rhythm that wasn't tied to a guitar or a stage. During a break, while they were waiting for their turn on the rifle range, Elvis found himself next to Billy. Billy was sitting on the ground, leaning against a tree, whittling a small piece of wood with a pocket knife. He was carving something intricate, a tiny bird taking shape under his nimble fingers. "That's mighty fine work, Billy," Elvis said, genuinely impressed. "You got a real talent there." Billy looked up, startled as if he hadn't noticed Elvis approaching. A feint? Presley? Just something to pass the time? Where'd you learn to do that? Elvis asked, crouching down beside him. My granddaddy taught me, Billy replied, his voice soft with a slow, distinct southern drawl even thicker than Elvis's own. Back home in Alabama. A flicker of something sadness longing crossed Billy's face. Quickly looked back down at his carving as if embarrassed by the emotion. Elvis recognized it immediately. It was the raw ache of homesickness. It was a universal feeling, but for some it bit harder than for others. He knew then that Billy was hurting. And Elvis, with his big heart, knew he wanted to help. Days turned into weeks, and Elvis continued to observe Billy. The barracks were a constant buzz of activity, but Billy remained an island in the midst of it. He did his duties diligently, followed orders without complaint, but his movements seemed to lack the usual youthful energy of the other recruits. He often had a faraway look in his eyes, as if he were constantly seeing something that wasn't there, hearing sounds that only he could perceive. Elvis tried to engage him in conversation whenever he had a chance. He'd talk about the weather, about the latest news from the States, shared through a crumpled newspaper, or about the tough drills. Billy would respond politely, usually with a word or two, never elaborating, never asking questions. Back, it was like talking to a wall, albeit a very polite wall. One evening, after lights out, the barracks were filled with the usual sounds of shuffling low whispers and the occasional creak of a bunk. Elvis lay awake, thinking. He could hear Billy's soft, even breathing from the bunk across from him. He wondered what Billy dreamed about. Did he dream of home? He thought about his own life before the army, the constant touring, the screaming fans, the bright lights. It had been a whirlwind, exciting but also incredibly demanding. Here, in the quiet discipline of the army, he found himself with more time to think, to truly see the people around him. And what he saw in Billy was a deep, quiet sadness. During mail call, which was always a chaotic and joyous affair, Elvis noticed Billy's reaction. When Sergeant Henderson called out names, a chorus of cheers would erupt when a soldier received a letter or a package. Guys would tear open envelopes, devouring words from loved ones, or eagerly unwrapping treats from home. Billy, however, rarely got mail. And when he did, it was usually a single thin letter that he would read quickly, almost secretly before tucking it away. He never shared its contents, never boasted about a sweet treat sent from a doting mother. His silence on mail day was deafening. One afternoon, during a rare moment of downtime, Elvis found Billy sitting alone on a bench outside the barracks, cleaning his rifle. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parade ground. Mind if I join you, Billy? Elvis asked, gesturing to the empty spot beside him. Billy looked up, startled again. Elvis sat down. The silence stretched between them, comfortable for some, but Elvis found it heavy. He wanted to break through to Billy, to offer some comfort. It's a long way from home, ain't it? Elvis started, his voice gentle. Sometimes I feel like I could walk to Memphis and back, just to get a good plate of Mama's fried chicken. Billy gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. Yeah, it sure is. What do you miss most about Alabama? Elvis asked, turning to face him fully. I reckon I miss everything. The smell of the pine trees, after a rain, the crickets at night, my granddaddy's fishing pond, my mama's pecan pie. He trailed off, his voice barely above a whisper. And my little sister, Mary Beth, she's only 6, writes me letters sometimes, draws pictures. Elvis's heart went out to him. A little sister. Pictured Billy, this quiet, reserved man, being the protective older brother. That's real sweet, my mama. She sends me all kinds of stuff, sometimes too much, bless her heart. He chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. She worries I ain't eating right. Billy chuckled too, a low, dry sound. It was the most Elvis had heard him express genuine amusement. My mama, she works hard. My daddy passed on a few years back, so it's just her, Mary Beth, and me," Billy continued, surprisingly opening up a little more. "It was tough leaving them. Had to, though. My number came up, but I worry about them." "They're tough, Billy. They'll be just fine," Elvis said, trying to reassure him. He remembered his own humble beginnings, his family's struggles. He understood the weight of responsibility Billy must feel. "And you're doing a good thing here, serving your country. They must be real proud of you." Billy nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on the distant horizon. "I hope so." The conversation faded again into silence. Billy resumed, cleaning his rifle. And Elvis just sat there thinking. Billy's words, though few, painted a clear picture. He wasn't just homesick for a place. He was homesick for his family, for the people who relied on him, and for the simple, comforting rhythm of his life back home. He carried the burden of being the man of the house, even from halfway across the world. Elvis realized that simple words of comfort wouldn't be enough. Billy needed more than a pat on the back or a shared complaint about army food. He needed a piece of home, something tangible, something that would remind him he wasn't forgotten, that his family was strong, and that his little sister, Mary Beth, missed him just as much as he missed her. An idea began to form in Elvis's mind, a quiet, almost secret plan. It wouldn't be easy, but he knew he had to try. He had to bring a little bit of Alabama to Friedberg. The idea, once it fully bloomed in Elvis's mind, felt right. It wasn't about grand gestures or flashy displays. It was about something small, personal, and deeply meaningful. He knew what it felt like to be far from loved ones, to yearn for the familiar, and while his own fame brought a different kind of separation, the ache of missing home was universal. He watched Billy more closely now, not just observing his quiet demeanor, but trying to pick up on little details. He noticed Billy always kept a small, worn photograph tucked into his wallet. Sometimes when he thought no one was looking, he'd pull it out, gaze at it for a moment, and then quickly put it away. Elvis guessed it was his family, his mama, and little Mary Beth. He also remembered Billy mentioning his granddaddy, and the whittling. The small bird Billy had carved was surprisingly delicate, showing a true artist's touch. It made Elvis think about the simple, everyday joys of home, the things that weren't grand but were the very fabric of life. The biggest challenge was how to do it. As Private Presley, his movements were restricted. He couldn't just walk into a store and buy what he needed. This would require some careful planning and a little bit of help from back home. Elvis decided his best bet was to write to his parents. His mama Gladys and his daddy Vernon were the most reliable people he knew. They understood him without him having to say much. He knew they'd do anything for him, and he trusted them completely. He'd have to explain his idea carefully without revealing too much or making it seem like a huge favor. He wanted it to be a quiet act of kindness, not a publicized event. That evening, after drills, when most of the guys were showering or writing letters, Elvis found a quiet corner in the recreation room. He pulled out a piece of army stationery and a pen. He began to write, "Dear Still, working hind you both doing well. Everything's all right here. Missing you both something fierce. And Mama, I'd give anything for a slice of your peach cobbler right now." He paused, thinking he needed to be subtle. "Listen, there's something I was hoping you could help me with. There's a fella here, a really good kid named Billy. He's from Alabama, and he's mighty homesick. You can just see it in his eyes. Talks about his mama, his little sister, and his granddaddy a lot. Said his granddaddy taught him to whittle, and his mama makes the best pecan pie. I was thinking, maybe if it's not too much trouble, you could help me put together a little something for him. Nothing big, just something to remind him of home. Maybe some photos if you could get in touch with his family somehow. I know that's a big ask, but I don't know anyone in Alabama. Maybe if you looked up his family in the phone book in his hometown." He mentioned a little sister named Mary Beth. "And something simple. Maybe a little jar of dirt from Alabama. Or some pine cones. Something that smells like home." I know it sounds a bit odd, but I reckon it would mean the world to him. And if Mama could maybe just a little bit of one of her pecan pies, not a whole one, just a slice if it would keep. Or maybe even just the recipe written out by her. If that's easier. He mentioned how much he missed his Mama's. I know this is a strange request, but it's important. I just want to cheer him up. He's a good boy, and he's carrying a heavy heart. Don't tell anyone about this, especially not the newspapers. I just want it to be from one soldier to another, just a private thing. I'll send you some money, of course, for whatever you can get. Please let me know if this is something you can do and tell everyone I said hello. All my love, Elvis. He sealed the envelope. He knew his parents would move heaven and earth for him. He just hoped they could find Billy's family. He hadn't given them much to go on. Just a first name, a state, and a sister's name. But his parents were resourceful. Over the next few days, Elvis found small ways to connect with Billy without drawing attention to his special project. He'd offer him a stick of gum or share a laugh during a drill. He made sure Billy felt included, even if Billy didn't always fully participate. He wanted to build trust so that when the gift finally arrived, it would feel like a natural extension of their growing camaraderie, not a charity project from the king. One afternoon, they were on mess duty together peeling potatoes. The air was thick with the smell of starch and damp earth. "You ever think about what you're going to do when you get out, Billy?" Elvis asked, peeling steadily. Billy shrugged. "Go home, I guess. Help Mama with the farm. Maybe get a job in town if there's one to be had." He paused. "Just want to get back to my family." "Yeah, I hear that," Elvis said, picturing Graceland, his guitars, the roar of the crowds. It felt like a lifetime ago. "I reckon I'll be singing a lot more. But maybe I'll get to fish more, too. My daddy and I used to go fishing all the time." Billy offered a rare, genuine smile. "My granddaddy, he taught me how to fish, too. We used to spend all day on the creek. Catch nothing sometimes, but it was still good." Elvis smiled back. These small moments, these shared glimpses into their home lives, were precious. They built a bridge between two very different men who were at their core, just two young men, far from everything they loved. He hoped his letter would reach his parents soon, and he hoped they could work their magic. He just wanted to see a genuine smile on Billy's face. A smile that reached his eyes. Weeks later, a letter arrived for Elvis, from his parents. His heart lay stand the familiar handwriting. "Dearest son, we got your letter. Don't you worry about a thing. We're on it. Your Mama, bless her heart. She was so touched by what you're trying to do for this young man," she said. "It just shows what a good heart you have, always thinking of others. Took a little doing, but your daddy found a phone book for that town in Alabama you mentioned. There weren't too many Presleys listed, so he just started calling, and wouldn't you know it, he found them. Billy's Mama, she was so surprised to hear from us. She said Billy talks about you in his letters, saying you're a real kind fella. She sounded a little worried about him, said he sounded low sometimes. We explained what you wanted to do, and she just about cried on the phone. She was so touched. She said she'd be more than happy to help. She sent us some photos, one of her and Mary Beth and one of Billy's granddaddy by his fishing pond. She even found a tiny little clay bird that Mary Beth made for Billy. And get this, she sent us a small jar of dirt from their backyard, just like you said, and some pine cones she gathered herself. Said she knew exactly what you meant by smells like home. And your Mama, she baked a special pecan pie. We wrapped a slice up real tight, put it in a sealed container, and packed it with a bunch of ice packs. We're hoping it makes it all the way to you in good shape. It was hard not to just eat it ourselves. It smelled so good. We sent everything off in a special package, marked perishable, and with a fragile sticker all over it. Should be there in a week or two. Depending on the mail, just keep an eye out for it. You're doing good work over there, not just as a soldier, but as a good human being. Take care of yourself. We love you more than words can say. All our love. Mama and Daddy Elvis felt a wave of warmth spread through him. His parents were truly amazing. A jar of dirt, pine cones, Mary Beth's clay bird. These were the things that truly mattered, the small, specific details that made a place home, and the pecan pie that was a touch only his mama could provide. Now came the hard part. Waiting. International mail was notoriously unpredictable, and keeping a secret in the army barracks was nearly impossible. He didn't want the package to arrive and everyone to know what it was for. He wanted the moment with Billy to be private, personal. Over the next 2 weeks, Elvis kept a close eye on the mail delivery. Every time the mail truck pulled up, a knot of anticipation formed in his stomach. He didn't tell anyone about the package, not even Tony or Mike, who were his closest friends in the barracks. This was something just for Billy. He continued to be himself, Elvis the soldier. He participated in drills, ate the mess hall food, and even volunteered for extra duties when he could. He noticed Billy seemed a little less withdrawn lately, perhaps because of their few brief conversations, or maybe just a shift in his own mood. Whatever the reason, Elvis hoped the package would arrive at the right time. One rainy afternoon, a large, well-wrapped box with several fragile and perishable stickers arrived in the mailroom. Elvis's heart leaped. He signed for it quickly, trying to act casual. The mail clerk, a burly corporal named Johnson, looked at the package with a raised eyebrow. "Looks like you got yourself quite the treat, Presley," Corporal Johnson chuckled. "Smells like something good in there. What'd your mama send you? A whole bakery." Elvis laughed, trying to sound natural. "Just some of her home cooking, Corporal. She worries about me. You know how mamas are." He quickly grabbed the box, feeling its weight, and hurried back to the barracks. He knew he couldn't open it there. Too many prying eyes. He had to find a safe, private place to store it until the right moment. He thought about his footlocker, but it wasn't big enough for such a large package, and the perishable pie needed to be kept cool. He finally settled on a small, empty storage locker in the back of the barracks that was usually used for overflow equipment. It was mostly overlooked, and he could slip in and out without much notice. Carefully placed the package inside, making sure it was hidden under some old blankets and uniforms. He knew he couldn't keep the pie there forever, but for a day or two it would be fine. He felt a thrill of excitement, mixed with a little nervousness. He had the gift. Now he just needed to find the perfect moment to give it to Billy. Couldn't be during a busy time or when others were around. It had to be just for them, a quiet, heartfelt moment. He wanted Billy to truly feel the love and thoughtfulness behind it. He wanted to see those eyes, usually so distant, light up with something real, something that connected him back to the red dirt of Alabama. The package was hidden. Now came the hardest part, the waiting game. Elvis had the gift, but he needed the right moment. Couldn't just hand it over in the middle of a busy training day or during chow. Needed to be quiet, personal. And when Billy was most receptive, he observed Billy even more intently now. Billy still had his quiet moments, but sometimes Elvis noticed a flicker of something in his eyes. A particularly bad mail day, a distant look during a group laugh, or a sigh that was a little too heavy. These were the moments Elvis looked for. One evening after dinner, most of the soldiers were gathered in the recreation room, listening to music on the radio, playing cards or writing letters. Elvis saw Billy sitting alone on his bunk, tracing patterns on the cover of a worn book. His shoulders were slumped, and he looked smaller than usual. Elvis's first instinct was to go get the package right then, but he hesitated. Was it the right time? Would Billy be embarrassed to receive something so personal in the open barracks? He decided to wait. He knew it was better to be patient and make sure the impact was truly felt. Just to talk, he sat down on the bunk next to him. "Hey, Billy, everything all right?" Billy looked up, a little startled. "Yeah, Presley, just thinking." "About home?" Elvis asked gently. "Yeah, my little sister, Mary Beth. She sent me a drawing today. It was just a stick figure drawing of our house, but it made me miss him. Something awful." His voice was barely a whisper. "Sometimes it just hits me. You know how far away I am. how long it's going to be. Elvis understood completely. The miles could feel like an ocean, and the time stretched out like an eternity. Yeah, I know that feeling. It's tough, real tough. He thought about the drawing Billy mentioned. He imagined Mary Beth's small hand, carefully making lines to represent her home, a little piece of her heart sent across the ocean. He remembered the small clay bird she had made, now carefully tucked away in the package. "You got a good family, Billy," Elvis said, trying to offer comfort without giving away his secret. "They're thinking about you every single day. And they're proud of you." Billy just nodded, still looking at the book. Elvis could see the sadness etched on his face. This was exactly what he had feared. The homesickness was deep. He spent the next 2 days trying to gauge the perfect moment. He considered giving it to him after a particularly grueling drill, when morale was low, or perhaps late at night, when the barracks were quiet. He even thought about finding a private spot outside, but each idea had its drawbacks. The barracks, despite their lack of privacy, were still a place of camaraderie. Giving it to Billy there, perhaps when most guys were asleep, would feel more natural, less like an awkward public event. He also had to consider the perishable pie. He couldn't leave it in the locker too long. He needed to act soon. One evening, after a long day of field training, everyone was exhausted. The barracks were quieter than usual. Most of the men were already in their bunks, some asleep, some reading by the dim glow of their bunk lights. Billy was one of the last to get into bed. He was washing up his movements, slow and tired. Elvis watched him. He saw the slight sag in Billy's shoulders, the way he rubbed his temples. This was it. This was the moment. The exhaustion would make him more vulnerable, perhaps more open to comfort. The quiet would make the moment more intimate. Elvis took a deep breath. He swung his legs out of his bunk, trying to be as quiet as possible. He slipped on his sandals and padded softly towards the back of the barracks where he'd hidden a package. He glanced around, making sure no one was watching. The few guys still awake seemed engrossed in their books or their thoughts. He opened the storage locker, feeling for the familiar shape of the box under the blankets. His fingers brushed against the cool plastic of the pie container. Good, it was still cool. He carefully pulled out the package, cradling it in his arms. It was heavier than he remembered, filled not just with objects, but with love, hope, and the smell of home. He walked back to his bunk, holding the package close to his chest. He stopped beside Billy's bunk. Billy was just settling in, pulling his blanket up to his chin. His eyes were closed. Elvis gently cleared his throat. "Billy," he whispered. Billy's eyes fluttered open. He blinked, surprised to see Elvis standing there with a large package. "Presley, what's all that?" he whispered back, trying not to disturb the others. Elvis offered a small, reassuring smile. "Just something for you, from home." Billy sat up slowly, his eyes wide with surprise and a hint of confusion. "From me, but I didn't get a package today." Elvis placed the box gently on Billy's bunk. It was a sturdy cardboard box, wrapped tightly in brown paper, with several stamps and customs declarations stuck to it. The faint, sweet smell of cinnamon and pecans wafted from it. "No, not through the usual mail call," Elvis whispered, motioning for Billy to keep his voice down. "This is a little something extra for my folks." Billy looked at the package, then at Elvis, his brow furrowed in disbelief. "Your folks? But why?" Elvis leaned in slightly. "Remember when we talked about home, about what you miss? My mama and daddy. I told them about you, about how you were missing your family, and how much you loved your mama's pecan pie, and your granddaddy, and your little sister." A slow understanding dawned on Billy's face, chased by a blush that crept up his neck. He looked incredibly embarrassed, but also deeply touched. You did all this for me." "Just wanted to help a fellow soldier, Billy," Elvis said, his voice soft and sincere. "We're all in this together, right? Especially when we're so far from home." Billy reached out a tentative hand and touched the package. His fingers brushed against the tough paper, then the smooth plastic of the container inside. He seemed almost afraid to open it. "Go on," Elvis encouraged gently. "It's for you." With trembling hands, Billy began to unwrap the package, pulled back the brown paper, revealing a smaller, carefully packed box inside. He opened the flaps. The first thing he saw was a small, tightly sealed plastic container. He lifted the lid, and the unmistakable, comforting aroma of fresh pecan pie filled the air around them. It wasn't a whole pie, just a single perfect slice nestled in wax paper. Billy's breath hitched, his eyes widened, and his bottom lip began to tremble almost imperceptibly. He lifted the pie slice, bringing it close to his nose, inhaling deeply. "Pecan pie," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "My mama's?" Next, he carefully pulled out a small glass jar. It was filled with dark, reddish-brown earth. He opened it, and the scent of damp soil, of forests and fields, hit him. It was the smell of Alabama. He brought it to his nose, his eyes closing for a moment, as if trying to imprint the scent into his memory. "My mama said this was from your backyard," Elvis explained quietly. "And those," he pointed to a small baggie, "are some pine cones she gathered near your home." Billy pulled out the pine cones, rolling one between his fingers. They smelled faintly of resin and cool, damp woods. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he quickly blinked them away. Then he found a small, carefully wrapped bundle. He unwrapped it to reveal a tiny, intricately sculpted clay bird painted in simple, bright colors. It wasn't perfect, a little lopsided, clearly made by a child's hands. "Mary Beth's?" Billy whispered, his voice cracking. He held the little bird in his palm, his thumb stroking its smooth surface. A single tear escaped and traced a path down his cheek. Finally, at the bottom of the box were a few photographs. Billy picked them up, his hands shaking slightly. The first was a picture of a kind-faced woman with dark hair, a resemblance to Billy standing beside a small, smiling girl with bright eyes. His mama and Mary Beth. The next was of an older man with a weathered face sitting by a serene-looking pond, holding a fishing rod. His granddaddy. Billy stared at the photos, his gaze fixed on the familiar faces. The tears that had been threatening finally broke free. They streamed silently down his cheeks, wetting his uniform shirt. He didn't try to hide them. He simply sat there, tears flowing, holding the photographs, the clay bird and the pine cone, close to him. Elvis watched him, his own throat tightening. He didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. He just sat there, allowing Billy the space to feel everything, to let out the sorrow and the longing that had been bottled up inside him for so long. Quiet of the barracks, punctuated only by a few distant snores, made the moment even more profound. Billy looked up, his eyes red and glistening, but a raw, heartfelt emotion shining through them. "Presley," he choked out, his voice barely audible. I don't know what to say." Billy kept crying, the tears flowing freely now. A quiet testament to the overwhelming emotion that had finally broken through his carefully built walls. Elvis didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there on the edge of Billy's bunk, a silent, comforting presence. He understood that these weren't just tears of sadness, but also of relief, of gratitude, and of being seen. After a few minutes, Billy took a ragged breath, trying to compose himself. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, sniffling. "I'm sorry, Presley," he whispered, looking embarrassed again. It's a lot." "No need to be sorry," Billy, Elvis said gently, his voice low. "It's all right. Let it out sometimes. You just gotta." Billy nodded, still holding the small clay bird and the photos in his hand. He looked at the picture of Mary Beth, a soft, loving expression on his tear-streaked face. "Mary Beth, she made this for me before I left. Said it was a good luck bird." He gave a small, watery chuckle. "I told her she was my good luck charm." Carefully placed the photos and the bird on his small footlocker next to his bed. Picked up the slice of pecan pie, breaking off a tiny piece. He put it in his mouth, closing his eyes as he chewed slowly. A look of pure bliss, mixed with profound sadness, spread across his face. "It tastes just like Mama's," he murmured, a fresh tear escaping. "Exactly like it," Elvis smiled. "My Mama, she's a real good cook. takes pride in her baking. Your folks, Billy said, looking at Elvis, his eyes still red but now shining with a deep, humble gratitude. They went to all this trouble for me, a stranger. You ain't a stranger, Billy, Elvis corrected softly. You're a fellow soldier, a friend, and anyone who's far from home needs a little bit of comfort now and then. Billy took another piece of the pie, savoring it. The comfort seemed to slowly seep into him, replacing the raw pain. I didn't think anyone here understood, he confessed, his voice still quiet, but now more open. I tried to be tough, you know, not complain. But sometimes the loneliness just gets to you, and knowing they're back there working so hard, and I'm here, it just feels like a heavy weight. It is a heavy weight, Billy, Elvis agreed, remembering his own feelings of responsibility. But you're doing your part. You're protecting them even from afar. They know that they're proud of you. Billy nodded slowly, looking at the jar of dirt. He picked it up and held it. This is from my backyard, right by the old oak tree. He inhaled its scent. I used to climb that tree with my granddaddy. We'd sit up there and tell stories. He paused, then looked at Elvis with an expression that Elvis would never forget. Presley, thank you. Thank your mama and daddy too. This means more to me than you'll ever know. It's like a little piece of home you brought home to me. The sincerity in Billy's voice, the raw emotion in his eyes, was more rewarding than any applause Elvis had ever received. He felt a deep sense of peace, a quiet satisfaction that settled in his own heart. This was why he'd done it. Not for recognition, not for fame, but for this moment of genuine human connection. You're welcome, Billy, Elvis said, his voice a little husky. Anytime. We're a family here, too, in a way. Gotta look out for each other. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the only sound the soft rustle of Billy unwrapping the pine cones, and the occasional creak of bunks as other soldiers shifted in their sleep. Quiet of the barracks seemed to wrap around them, holding their shared moment. Finally, Elvis gently pushed himself up. You get some rest now, Billy, and finish that pie. You deserve it. Billy looked up, a faint, genuine smile finally gracing his lips. It reached his eyes, making them crinkle at the corners. It was the first time Elvis had seen such a profound, unburdened smile on Billy's face since he'd arrived in Germany. I will, Presley, Billy said, his voice full of warmth. Thanks. Really, thanks for everything. As Elvis slipped back into his own bunk, he felt lighter than he had in weeks. He knew the road ahead for Billy and for all of them was still long and hard. But tonight, a small piece of home had traveled across an ocean, carried on the wings of kindness, and landed right where it was needed most. And for Elvis Presley, Private E2, U.S. Army, that was a victory greater than any hit record. The next morning, the barracks woke up to the usual cacophony of alarms and shouting sergeants. But something felt different to Elvis. As he got dressed, he glanced over at Billy's bunk. Billy was already up, meticulously making his bed. The usual slump in his shoulders was gone, replaced by a straighter posture. There was a subtle spring in his step. When Billy turned around, he caught Elvis's eye. Instead of the usual quick glance away, Billy held his gaze, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. It was a silent acknowledgement, a shared secret between them. Elvis smiled back, a genuine, warm smile. At breakfast, Billy sat with them as usual, but this time he joined in the conversation. Man, I slept like a baby last night, Tony declared, stretching. Guess all that marching finally caught up with me. Tell me about it, Mike grumbled. My feet are screaming. You know, I actually woke up feeling pretty good, Billy said, surprising everyone. He even took a second helping of eggs, which was unusual for him. Something about the air today, I guess. He glanced at Elvis, a twinkle in his eye. Elvis tried to keep a straight face, but a small smile escaped. Throughout the day, Elvis noticed more changes. During drills, Billy seemed more focused, more engaged. His answers to the sergeant's questions were clearer, more confident. He even managed a few jokes with Mike during a break, something Elvis had never witnessed before. Later that afternoon, during a lull, Elvis saw Billy sitting outside, not alone, but with a small group of guys, including Tony and Mike. He was holding the little clay bird carefully, showing it to them. He was talking, his voice animated, something Elvis rarely heard. As Elvis walked past, he overheard Billy saying, "Yeah, my little sister, Mary Beth. She made it for me. She's real talented. And my granddaddy, he taught me to whittle. He used to say a good piece of wood has a story waiting to be told." Tony whistled. "That's pretty cool, Billy. You never told us you had a little sister." Billy chuckled. "Yeah, she's a firecracker. Keeps my mama on her toes." He pointed to the picture of his mama and Mary Beth, which he had now proudly displayed inside his locker. "That's them, and that's my granddaddy by his fishing pond." He wasn't just talking about his family, he was sharing them, inviting others into his world. The walls he had built around himself were slowly coming down. Elvis watched from a distance, a swell of pride and happiness filling his chest. The gift hadn't just brought Billy comfort. It had given him back a piece of himself, a connection to the world beyond the barracks, and the confidence to share that connection with others. That evening after lights out, when the barracks settled into its usual quiet hum, Elvis heard a soft voice from Billy's bunk. "Presley?" "Yeah, Billy," Elvis whispered back. "That pie, it was the best thing I've eaten in months," Billy said. "And the dirt, it really does smell like home, like the rain on the Alabama red clay." Elvis smiled in the darkness. "Glad it made it okay." "It wasn't just the pie or the dirt," Billy continued, his voice a little shaky again, but not with sadness, with something else. "It was knowing someone cared enough that you cared, that you went to all that trouble." "We're all family here, Billy," Elvis reiterated. "We gotta stick together, far from home. That's more important than ever." "It is," Billy agreed. "It really is." There was a pause. Then, "Thanks again, Presley, for everything." "Anytime, Billy, anytime." Elvis lay in his bunk, listening to the soft sounds of the barracks. The weight in Billy's heart had lifted, and in its place a quiet strength had bloomed. And in helping Billy, Elvis had found a deeper meaning in his own time in the Army. It wasn't just about serving his country. It was about serving the men beside him, about brotherhood, and the enduring power of human kindness. The simple act of bringing a little bit of home across an ocean had done more than just dry a few tears. It had opened a heart, strengthened a spirit, and forged an unbreakable bond. The change in Billy was undeniable. It wasn't an overnight transformation into the most boisterous soldier, but it was a profound shift. His shoulders remained less slumped, his gaze was more direct, and a distant haunted look in his eyes was mostly gone. He still had quiet moments, but they were now moments of thought, not of deep isolating sadness. He started joining in barracks conversations more, offering opinions, sometimes even a wry comment that made the others laugh. He began to form stronger friendships, particularly with Tony and Mike. They would often gather around his bunk, looking at the photos of his family, listening to him talk about Alabama. The little clay bird became a kind of mascot, often sitting proudly on his locker shelf. Elvis watched all this with a quiet satisfaction. He never brought up the gift again, not explicitly. It was their secret, a silent understanding that passed between them in knowing glances and shared smiles. But the ripple effect of that one act of kindness was clear. One afternoon during a break in training, Elvis was sitting alone polishing his boots. Billy came over and sat beside him casually. "Hey, Presley," Billy said, the voice relaxed. "Hey, Billy," Elvis replied, looking up. "Just wanted to tell you something," Billy began, looking down at his hands. "I got a letter from my mama yesterday. She said your mama and daddy called again just to check in. Said they were asking about me." Elvis smiled. "That's just like them. They worry about everybody." "She said they sounded real nice," Billy continued, a warm smile spreading across his face. "And Mary Beth, she drew a new picture for me. She drew your mama and daddy with halos over their heads, called them angel people." Elvis chuckled, genuinely touched. "Bless her heart." "It's not just the stuff they sent, Presley," Billy said, looking at him directly, his eyes clear and earnest. It's knowing that there are people out there, strangers, who care enough to reach out, to go out of their way. It made me feel connected, like I wasn't all alone out here. "You're never alone, Billy," Elvis said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We're all here together, and everyone misses home. It's just that some folks hide it better than others." Billy nodded. "Yeah, I get that now. I used to think it was a weakness to be homesick, like I had to be tough all the time. But you showed me it's okay to feel it, and it's okay to need help." Paused, then added, "It made me want to help others too, to look out for the new guys coming in, you know, see if they're struggling." This was what Elvis had hoped for. The true power of kindness wasn't just in the initial act, but in the way it inspired others to pay it forward. Billy, who had been an isolated island, was now becoming a bridge for others. A few days later, Elvis saw Billy talking to a new recruit, a young kid who looked barely old enough to shave his eyes wide and scared. Billy was talking to him gently, pointing out things in the barracks, making him laugh. Later, Elvis saw Billy sharing a piece of chocolate from a care package he'd received with the same new recruit. It was a small gesture, but Elvis knew it meant the world. The days passed, filled with the usual army routine, but the atmosphere in their corner of the barracks felt lighter, warmer. Billy's laughter became more frequent, his presence more vibrant. He even started playing checkers with the guys in the recreation room, something he never would have done before. Elvis knew his time in the army was a unique experience, different from most. But it was moments like these that truly defined it for him. Stripped of his fame, he was just a man like any other trying to make a difference where he could. And in helping Billy, he had found a profound sense of purpose that went beyond music or performance. He often thought about the pecan pie, the jar of dirt, and the little clay bird. Simple things, really. But infused with love and empathy, they had become something magical. They had healed a homesick heart, rebuilt a spirit, and forged a lasting friendship. As the weeks turned into months, Elvis and Billy continued to be good friends. They shared stories, supported each other through tough drills, and found common ground in their shared experience as soldiers. So far from home, the gift was never mentioned again, but its memory lingered, a warm, comforting presence that cemented their bond. It was a silent testament to the extraordinary power of a simple act of human kindness performed by one king for a fellow soldier in need. As the seasons shifted in Germany and the initial shock of army life faded into routine, the bond between Elvis and Billy deepened. They were more than just bunkmates. They were confidants. They would often sit together during downtime, Billy sometimes whittling, Elvis humming a tune under his breath. Just enjoying the quiet companionship, Billy continued to thrive. He became a respected member of the platoon, known for his steady nature and his surprising sense of humor. He often joked about his angel people back in Tennessee, referring to Elvis's parents, and would proudly show off the photos in his locker, especially the one of Mary Beth's little clay bird, which always remained on his shelf. Elvis, in turn, found a quiet strength in Billy's newfound resilience. He saw firsthand how a little bit of care could transform someone. It wasn't about being Elvis Presley, the famous singer. It was about being Elvis, the man who simply wanted to help another person. One crisp autumn evening a few months after the pecan pie arrived, Elvis and Billy were on guard duty together, patrolling a quiet section of the base perimeter. The air was cool, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. The stars above were brilliant, unhindered by city lights. "You know, Presley," Billy said, breaking the silence, his voice thoughtful, "sometimes when I first got here, I used to just stare at the stars and feel so small, like I was at the very end of the world." Elvis looked up at the vast expanse of the night sky. "Yeah, I know what you mean. It can feel pretty overwhelming." "But now," Billy continued, "when I look up, I think about that dirt, that jar of dirt from my backyard, and it makes me feel connected, like no matter how far I am, a little bit of home is always with me." He paused. "And it makes me think about you too, and your mama and daddy, that there's good people everywhere, even in places you don't expect." Elvis felt a lump in his throat. This was the true legacy of the gift. It wasn't just a temporary fix. It was a lasting comfort, a shift in perspective. "That's a good way to look at it, Billy," Elvis said, his voice a little gruff with emotion. "We all need something to hold on to, something that reminds us where we came from and who we are. And you gave that to me," Billy said, turning to face him in the dim light. "You really did. You saved me from myself, I think, from just giving up and letting the homesickness eat me alive." Elvis clapped him gently on the shoulder. "You're a strong man, Billy. You had it in you all along. I just gave you a little nudge, that's all." "A nudge, a slice of pie, a jar of dirt, and a little sister's bird," Billy said, a fond smile on his face. "Some nudge." They walked on in comfortable silence, the shared understanding between them, a tangible presence in the cool night air. The war in Korea might be ending, and whispers of going home were beginning to circulate, but their friendship would last beyond any conflict or military posting. The day he left Friedberg was a bittersweet one. He said goodbye to his fellow soldiers, shaking hands, exchanging promises to write. When he got to Billy, they stopped for a moment, just looking at each other. "Take care of yourself, Billy," Elvis said, his voice full of genuine affection. "And don't forget that pecan pie," Billy grinned. "Never." "And don't you forget about us, Presley, or that a good man can come from anywhere, even Hollywood." He chuckled. "Or Memphis." "Never, Billy, never." Elvis' promise. He clasped Billy's. As Elvis boarded the troop transport, he looked back at the barracks, at the familiar faces waving goodbye. He saw Billy standing there, a strong, upright figure among his comrades. And Elvis knew with a certainty that settled deep in his heart that his time in the army hadn't just been about serving his country. It had been about learning, about connecting, and about the simple, profound power of a gift that brought tears of healing and hope to a homesick soldier's eyes. It was a memory he would carry with him, far more precious than any award or accolade, a silent melody of kindness that would resonate through the rest of his life.